This is the Vapor 15 Elite from Nike, and it is the most popular high-end football boot in the world. And at a retail price of $260, you would think it should be pretty close to perfect. Unfortunately, it's not, because while there are some great features in this boot, there's also some pretty big drawbacks. So in this video, we're gonna cover all there is to know about the Vapor 15 Elite so you can decide if it's a good option for you. And of course, if you're interested in picking up these or any of the other boots we discuss, you can find links to them on sale with discount codes in the description below. And to start off, let's talk about how these boots are designed. So starting off with the upper and how these boots feel in hand, they are extremely premium to the touch. The Vaporposit upper has a matte finish, so it's not going to be sticky at all, but it also has this really subtle cross-woven pattern that I really like. And then towards the center of the football boot, you're going to find Nike's traditional fly knit material that they've been using for several years. It's a nice stretchy elasticated knit material that's going to run under the lacing system and then all around the collar of the boot, providing a decent amount of comfort and lockdown. And then of course, if you're interested in getting the high cut version of this boot, you can get the Superfly 9. And that Superfly version is going to be virtually identical to the Vapor 15 Elite that we have here, except this fly knit material is going to go all the way up to the ankle. Then if you look just inside the heel area, you're also going to get a really soft liner that's going to cushion the back of your foot. And you can tell that the Vapor is the thinnest and lightest boot that Nike has in their line, because when shining under the right light, you can actually see that parts of the upper are going to be translucent. And at just 200 grams in a size 10.5, there's no denying that they are extremely lightweight. And then flipping over to the back of the boot, for the first time, you are going to have Nike's Air Zoom unit running throughout the sole plate here, which alleges to add a slight energy return with every step you take. And then on this firm ground version here, you are going to have a collection of TriStar and very sharp bladed studs throughout both the forefoot and the heel area. And thankfully for those who play on artificial grass, you can also pick up the Vapor 15 in an AG tooling if you go on Nike's website. Now, while these studs are going to be really great for providing traction on firm ground surfaces, that's where the pros pretty much end for me when it comes to this sole plate, because in my opinion, this sole plate is just far too narrow, especially in that toe box area. It has this torpedo-like design that causes these boots to taper really dramatically towards the front of the foot. And not only does this sole plate taper a bit too much towards the front of the boot, but it's also incredibly rigid. I mean, I'm trying almost as hard as I can here, and it is nearly impossible to bend the boots at the midfoot. And while a lot of brands will tell you that they need their sole plates to be rigid to propel yourself forward on the field, you need some sort of bend towards the middle of the football boot to allow your foot to correctly pronate. And just to show you as an example, when you're running, this is what your football boot should be able to do. Whereas in the Vapor 15s, that sole plate is pretty much going nowhere. So while the stud configuration for the Vapors is great, the overall shape and the flex could definitely use some work. Next up, let's talk about how the design impacted the fit and feel. So I actually had really high hopes trying on the Vapor 15 Elite here, because a couple months back, I tried on the third tier takedown Vapor 15 Academy, and I loved playing in those boots. Because those Academy models were actually a lot more comfortable than I anticipated, and they really blew me away, especially considering their price point of just around $70. So at $260, I really just wanted to get a more premium version of that experience, but unfortunately, these boots just did not work for me. And to give you some background, it's actually been quite a few years since I played in a premium top-end Vapor model. It was actually back when the Vapor 4 was released almost 10 years ago. And those boots at the time I thought were great, but since then my feet have definitely got a little bit wider, and I forgot just how restrictive the Mercurials were. Now, if you happen to have a narrower foot shape and you do feel comfortable in most other Nike models, there's a good chance that the Vapor 15 will work for you. But at the same time, I mean, if you do feel really comfortable in these boots, there's a good chance that you've been playing for a very long time and you've been consistently forcing yourself into some really narrow boots. Now, I started playing when I was around 8 years old, and I grew up forcing myself to wear whatever was the most popular football boot in the time, and it led to really constricting my feet towards the front of the toe box, and it definitely affected how my feet developed. Now, over the past few years, I've actually been trying to correct that by wearing slightly wider shoes in terms of sneakers, and also wearing slightly wider football boots. Now, just to give you guys a little comparison here, right here's the Vapor 15s, and here's the Copa Gloro from Adidas, which is, I would say, an average width football boot, and you can see that you're getting close to around a ½ centimeter or more of width at the front of the boot with the Copa Gloro. Now, if you want to see an even crazier comparison, here's the Vapor 15, and here is one of the sneakers that I currently use. Now, this is more of a barefoot minimalist sneaker from a company called Tolos, and you can see just how much wider the toe box is. And I think the difference is even more stark if you look at the back of the shoes here. I mean, it is just insane how much more space you're getting and how much more naturally shaped the barefoot shoe is. Now, don't get me wrong, football boots are performance footwear, so you do want them to hug your feet relatively close, and you don't want there to be a lot of extra space throughout the boot. And I'm not saying that Nike should throw everything out and start from scratch with their design here. Instead, what I think they should do is just make small incremental changes to their next model to make these boots more comfortable and more accommodating to most players. Because at the end of the day, you want to be picking up a pair of football boots that fits the shape of your feet, not a pair of boots that your feet have to fit into. And to show you what I'm talking about, this is a pair of custom-made football boots that are actually 3D printed based off the exact shape of my foot. And as you can see here, the shape of the toe box is clearly different from what Nike is giving you in the Vapor 15s. Now, obviously, everyone is unique, and I'm not saying that my feet are going to be the same shape as yours, but one thing I can guarantee you is that nobody's foot looks exactly like this. And that's what I find so frustrating about these boots, because Nike does make so many right decisions, and there's a lot of cool engineering that goes into this product. The Vaporposit upper is really cool, the knit collar feels great on your feet, but when it comes to the shape, they just fumble everything so unnecessarily. So while I really wanted these boots to feel great on feet, unfortunately, I can't say for me that they did. But if Nike were to give us a football boot with just 1 centimeter more width towards the front and a slightly more anatomical shape, I would be the first one on board. So once I got these boots on feet, what were they actually like to play in? Well, there were actually some pretty cool highlights wearing the Vapor 15s. As I mentioned, the upper is so razor thin, and you get a nice clean connection on the ball with every touch. And I also really like that the Vaporposit material isn't sticky. You actually get a clean matte touch, so it's easy to get the ball out from under your feet with every dribble. And Nike did do a great job designing the heel area with this elasticated knit material hugging your ankle really closely. The traction that you're going to get from this sole plate also feels really quick, precise, and surgical. So changing directions on a dime without slipping is going to be really easy to do when you've got these on. But then after training in these for a little over an hour, that's when the cons started to come out, because the rigidity of the sole plate and the crushingly narrow toe box eventually did lead to some fatigue throughout my feet. And if you've ever played in a pair of boots for a few hours and you get this massive feeling of relief as soon as you get them off, that's the exact feeling I got when I took these off. And I want to stress, that's not a feeling you should be getting when you take off your boots, as in your feet shouldn't be feeling fatigue or pain in any area. And for that reason, I wouldn't personally feel comfortable wearing these for a full game. Next up, let's talk about the value of these boots. So while the Vapor 15 Elite does retail at a full price of $260, you can actually find certain colorways on sale right now for closer to $160 or $170. So if you can find a pair for under $200 and you know that they're gonna fit you comfortably, that is actually a pretty good deal. But for me, the problem with the value proposition here is how many other options there are in that $100 to $200 range. And that leads us to the competition for the Vapor 15. So the first major competitor I want to point out to the Elite version here is actually going to be the Academy model, which is the third tier version I mentioned earlier. That boot is going to retail for around $70 to $80, and in my humble opinion, I just found it to be overall a little bit more comfortable. I'm not saying the Vapor 15 Academy is the most comfortable boot of all time, but personally, I just think it's better value, and I'd prefer to play longer sessions in those boots compared to these. But when you look at other boots from Nike, that's where you also start to find more value. Because in my opinion, the Tiempo Legend 10, either the previous version or the current Emerald version, is just going to be a more comfortable and more affordable football boot than the Vapor 15. In fact, you can get the Emerald version of the Tiempo Legend 10 Pro for around $130, which is half the price of this boot. And in almost every way, I think the Tiempo is just better. And then if you want another more comfortable option from Nike, but in a leather variation, you can check out the Nike Premier 3, which retails for as low as $100. But what if you're a really big fan of this lightweight speed boot design, but you want something with a more accommodating wide fit? In that case, I would recommend going over to New Balance and checking out the Furon V7 Pro or the Tequila V4 Pro. Other great options also include the Mizuno Morelia 2 or the Morelia Neo 4 Beta. So what are my final thoughts on the Vapor 15 Elite from Nike? While these boots do a lot of things right in terms of materials and overall build quality, unless you feel really comfortable in narrow fitting football boots, I wouldn't recommend them. And I think moving forward, as Nike iterates this model, instead of focusing on slightly more technical gimmicks like this air zoom unit, which in my opinion doesn't make a huge difference on the field, they should focus on making incremental changes to improve the fit of these boots. And I'm not advocating for a drastic design change, just something that doesn't constrict the shape of your foot as much. And that is gonna do it for this video. So please let me know in the comments below if you've tried on the Vapor 15 Elites and what you think of them. And if you have enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel because it really helps out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.